So in our last video, we talked about a fallacy, and that fallacy was called, is it better? Or too bright? Anyway, that fallacy was called denying the antecedents. And so now we're going to talk about another form of a hypothetical syllogism, and I want you to think about whether or not this is valid. So here's my hypothetical statement. If you get an A on your report card, then you'll get cake as a reward. Let's say that you ended up getting cake. Does that necessarily mean that you got an A on your report card? So I'm going to put a big fat question mark here. Okay, does it necessarily mean that you got an A on your report card? Or is there any other way that you could have gotten cake? So I'm going to show you what the abbreviated form of this argument would be. And when I'm doing abbreviated forms, I can use any letters I want, but like I said earlier, usually P's and Q's are used. Maybe for you to mind your P's and Q's, I don't know. So here's the abbreviated form of this argument. If P, then Q, Q, therefore P. So this is just like a general form of it. You could use any letters that you wanted. Does it necessarily have to happen this way? And I hope that you have answered no. Because in this cake situation, yeah, I said if you got an A, you could eat cake. But does that mean that anytime I see you eating cake for the rest of your life, that means you got an A on your report card? I'm pretty sure there might be other reasons why you would have gotten cake. So this form of this argument is invalid. It is a fallacy. And this fallacy has a special name, just like the last one. So in the last one, we denied the antecedent. In this one, if you look at the second premise, I'm not saying anything about my antecedent. What I'm talking about is my consequence. And so this fallacy is called affirming the consequent. And anytime any sort of argument is made that's in this form, it's always invalid. And that's why we call this formal logic, because we're studying the forms of arguments, not the actual content of them. So using my example from 1 John 1:9, which says, if we confess our sins, then he is faithful and just to forgive us our sins. Let's apply that here. So what that would look like is this. It would say, if we confess, then he will forgive us. Now, if I was going to use this form, my next premise would say, well, God forgave me. Does that mean that I confessed that sin? Or is there any other way he could have forgiven me? And again, you can tell that this argument is not valid. Just because he said this in 1 John and just because he forgave me does not necessarily mean that I confessed that sin. And so this is just another example of using an invalid argument.